We are live.
Yes, we are.
Welcome to 3D Learner. We are actually in two remote situations. I love it. Um, Mark is in our main office in South Florida. I happen to be in our facility in North Carolina. Yes, we are in North Carolina, even though we see kids remotely all over the world. But we're excited to be able to have some fabulous teachers doing our program. So, for those of you who I think most of our listeners probably know, whether you're hearing us live or whether you're hearing us and repeat, have started school or about to start school. And for your right brain, visual, or kinesthetic learner, especially, getting the right help from your school is vital. Now, it's vital for everyone, but and what we're going to share with you tonight certainly can be used for all kids, but we want to be able to stress the importance of why it's vitally important for these kids that learn differently, that are really the hands-on visual learners that have probably suffered more trauma than most in the last couple of years through everything that's happened.
This
Mark?
is true. Okay. So, Mara, who are these kids we're talking about?
We are talking about when we're talking about the kids that are when we always say right brain, we're talking about the kids that are really creative, really sensitive, really hands-on learners. These are sometimes the kids, as we affectionately call them, the Lego kids. They like building things. They like creating things. They love drawing. They may not necessarily be really terrific artists, but they love they have really great imaginations, and sometimes words they can't. They look like me right now. Like can't get the words out exactly like they think they should be because the picture in their head is so strong and they can't always put words to what it is that they're thinking. They are emotional. They think it, as I said, they think in pictures, but the words go to pictures, but have emotions to them. And more than anything, they miss a lot of verbal directions. They miss a lot of verbal conversation. So if a teacher is very talkative or is very loud or happens to be a yeller, um, they can have more difficulties than not. So telling them to just get over or get used to it is obviously not a positive thing, and we'll get into that just a little bit.
And what about executive function, which it seems to be the buzzword of the time?
Why, how many reports have we seen in the last couple of years that have this executive function thing? What does this mean? And there's talk about a working memory. Now, our visual learners, they're really good at creating those pictures, those movies in their head, and more than anything, they're really good at remembering experiences and things that they did from a really long time ago. So you think, oh, they have a great memory. Well, it's that working memory because do they have the information right when they need it, what they need when they need it, and can they do it fast enough? And like an executive of a company, can they manage all of these things all at the same time? And by and large, the answer is no, they cannot. And so there's where the executive function piece comes in, and why these are, I don't even know, Mark, why do people even call them soft skills? But they are not, they're, they're not skills that are assessed by a school by and large. They are certainly assessed by outside testing professionals, which is how they they have this. But it's an interesting. I mean, but without them, it's kind of like our computers don't work if we very well if we actually don't have the processing to be able to and the memory to be able to handle all the material that we actually have to be able to that we actually have to learn and take in and put out. It's fascinating that schools actually really don't assess or address those issues, which is really frustrating. And then the other biggest part, of course, is the visual processing issues, which both you and I have visual processing, and this is not a 2020 vision piece. This is are my two eyes coming from two different sides of my face working together to be able to see that tiny little print that's 15 to 18 inches away from us, whether it is in a book or on a screen, or do I accommodate from here all the way across the room? How do my two eyes send information back and forth to my brain? So all of those kinds of things, I think if you have any one of these issues, let alone all three, that makes you a child that has or that has an even more difficult time, and we'll say coping in a classroom, let alone learning, let alone excelling in a classroom.
Now, what's interesting is teachers are usually not aware of the child being a visual kinesthetic learner, probably not formally aware of what executive function issues are going on, and almost never aware of the visual processing issues. So when you as a parent become aware of these gifts and challenges, it's really important to share what's relevant with your teacher, child's teacher, because it makes them that much more effective. One other thing is the visual processing has probably been the most controversial item in the sphere we operate in. It's real, it's present. We know of dyslexia experts have now that have come on board and understood this to be true. It has nothing to do with dyslexia. It is a condition that's often coexists with dyslexia, with a kid who's a kinesthetic learner, with a kid with executive function issues. And one of the things about visual and kinesthetic learners, they tend to have strong peripheral vision, so they can scan the room and great at looking out there, but have trouble focusing on a written word, may have trouble copying off the board, may have trouble hitting a baseball, all these issues that are reliant on the child's ability for the two eyes to converge.
They are also amazing problem solvers. They might not be sequential problem solvers, but they are, it's sort of interesting, right? Everybody uses other out of the box thinkers. And as you know, you're always kidding me about the fact that it's like, okay, what box? The challenge really is that the kids that, they, 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 they desperately need structure to work with, but given to their own devices, they have none whatsoever. And so therefore it looks a lot like these kids have attention. Well, they have attention issues, but that they actually get a distinct diagnosis of ADHD because they are all over the place.
And it's also important to know they could also often hyper focus on that, which is
Right.
important to them.
Right.
So you want to talk about these three?
So 3D learner, or us as we've come to understand, we are parents of a couple of 3D learners that and have worked with thousands of kids for over 25 years now. And we've really capitalized on, we've recognized that capitalizing on their strengths is vital. It's the one way to be able to have them recognize that they are competent, because I think that there's so many things they may learn differently completely from the way the schools are operating or the teachers are teaching. And it's through no fault of their own. These kids don't choose not to learn, but quite honestly, when you identify their strengths and work through them, meaning use those strengths to be able to work the areas that they're not so strong at, it is amazing how much more successful they are, let alone the biggest issue piece really is their anxiety level goes down. They start to be able to have a resilience and a sparkle about them. That's why you can see I'm pretty passionate that both Mark and I are really excited about working with these kids. And it's like, yes, when they get it, it is truly space. It is truly like a light bulb goes off in their head. And it is what Dr. Linda Silverman talks about, aha moments, right? These kids go from an aha moment to the next, and they get it when they relate to it and they can see themselves doing it. And they can actually start to be able to use it, show it, and it's sort of interesting. They can start to be able to show it with their hands. Again, they may not be terrifically artistic, but it's meaningful to them, right? It's like the work shows the way they know what they're doing.
And by the way, as
They
Miriam
feel
alludes to, they may not be terribly artistic, or they may be gifted that area. Some
right. They might be.
most gifted artists are, in fact.
Well, Leonardo da Vinci was pretty good. It's exactly
So
right.
some of the critical steps, what we've seen is an incredible amount of frustration and anxiety reading is all,
Even in the first few days of school, right?
yeah, and reading has always been a cause of concern, but this year math be through the roof as a biggest driver of problems, because the truth of the matter is is built on itself. So you learn something one year and you go on the next year and you have to have learned what you were supposed to have learned last year. And so many of these kids have gaps that were
What year?
wide and became ravines. So they're freaking out a little bit. Okay.
Just a little.
And one of the things you want to do is not comment so much, but observe what's happening. What are they missing? And talk to some other teachers and other parents and see is the same thing happening for them. Okay. And we'll talk about later. One of the critical things is to assess for success, because in our vernacular, the really important thing is to understand both the child's strengths and weaknesses that are often, as Mira alluded to before, not really assessed for in schools. And even when they might catch a working memory issue, they don't actually address it because they're much more into reading, math, behaviors
Well,
than
they're
they are
looking at
into the
behaviors
executive
first,
function.
right?
Well,
Right.
behaviors are out of control in some respects. Okay.
Right. I mean, first of all, we have to really understand everybody's tension level. If we think things were high, things are just that much more difficult. Teachers were, I don't even know how to look. I can't even to say it out loud. This is a very difficult time, and we all want what's right and best for our kids, but our kids are also scared. So our kids are scared to speak up. And if they're already at the state of being anxious and afraid to be able to say anything, and then all of a sudden a parent goes booming in, right? Like this is a very this is this takes a certain amount of everybody take a deep breath. Everybody take a step. Let's look at the bigger picture and then figure out what it is that we can all work do to be able to make as Mark has the very first word, like stabilize it. What do we have to be able to do to be able to come in as helpful partners with our teachers and understand what we can do they can do together to be able to help their kids at least feel comfortable in a classroom right now.
And the other thing is, it's really important to find the right professionals for your child, whatever their strengths and challenges are. Because if you're a kinesthetic
Right.
learner and you got executive function issues, you got visual processing issues, you got anxiety and frustration, it's really hard to go to 5 different places to try to address that. So you
Right.
got to look for people that actually do that. And then it's
Right.
really important. I want to add another point to this last comment. It's important to not only share relevant information with your child's teacher, it's incredibly important to build a rapport with your child's teacher.
Right.
They are having the most difficult year in their careers, probably, because many of them are dealing with kids at home who have similar challenges. They might be dealing with grandparents or who maybe they lost a parent or something like that. Now they're having to deal with kids who are having all these problems. The number of the amount of teacher shortages is through the roof. So our own daughter, who's a specialist, has been called into sub. Teachers are going to be stressed, and you want to do everything you can to make sure the teacher knows you're on their side and work as a team.
But it really is important for your teachers to understand all the kinds of variables that are going on. It may be difficult time for you, and we recognize that your child, and especially these right brain kinesthetic visual learners, they're very attuned to what's going on. So, just let them know in confidence and see what you can do about trying to be able to I know this is busy, teacher, but please can you call Bobby aside and just say, "Hey, I'm here for you. What would you like to be? What that have them your child know that your teacher actually is listening, and more importantly, that your kids know that you're listening to their complaints. I get it. Yes, summer seems like it went really fast, and how can it be over already? And all of us are
But it
kind of
is.
grumbling that way. But the point really is that if your kids listen to what they're saying, and as Mark said, sort of observe, and we're going to go through that a little bit now about what you're observing from the very beginning about schoolwork.
But Mary added a really critical point here, which is listen to what your kid says. Your kid might be anxious and frustrated. You might take them to IHOP or you might take them to a park on a Saturday and say, Johnny, I know you're frustrated. I just need to understand what are the triggers? What's actually bothering you? Because they'll share it with you, but not in the heat of the moment.
Right.
You got to find
You
that
actually,
magic
you
moment
actually,
one on one.
right. And they need to know that you hear them. I mean, truly hear them and understand their fear. Remember, their picture, their perception is their reality. Everybody hates me. My teacher hates me. Those are really strong words. But those are the emotion of a word that these kids, of a feeling that these kids feel. And trying to be able to get out of them exactly what it is, try to be able to calm the work the conversation so don't, oh, I'm sure so and so doesn't hate you. That's
But it's their
it's what we all
perception that they
think, it's
do.
what we all feel. Right. Okay. But the point really is trying to be able to get at why it is. What do you think happened? I am not mad at you. I'm just trying to be able to understand why you feel so strongly about that. And you're not trying to be able to be condescending. You're truly trying to be able to be an understanding parent of what this child is going through, because it is a very difficult time. And sometimes they have difficult times putting it into words. That is true.
Now, what can
So
you do
there's
as
a
a
lot of
parent?
things. You're right. Right? I'm sorry?
So, what can you do as a parent to help your child be calm, confident, and focused? Okay.
Well, so the hardest thing, of course, is being calm yourself, right? That is the very first thing. So sometime, even before the morning, like take, again, sort of, more about taking a deep breath and sort of getting a handle on yourself so that you feel like that you've got this. Your kids will certainly mirror that. Being able to, I know parents, I get the fact that having you think about having a routine, getting up, yes, getting up earlier, having to be able to deal with everything now, with everything else you have to be able to do. But being able to try and have a visual schedule for these kids makes a huge difference. This doesn't have to be all on you. You can have your child help you. Even 4 and 5 year olds can help you sort out what goes where or how they want their visual week to be able to look. But just being able to have that up. Please, I know we all use these to be able to use our calendar, but being able to have the old fashioned paper pencil one, or if you get a whiteboard that goes up so that people can actually really see it. Yes, a healthy diet, being able to try and water is one of the things we actually didn't put on here. We should put that in giant letters, Mark, I guess.
It's,
Um,
it's, it's already being added.
and hydrated. Do this for yourself first, and then make sure that your child has that. I'm not sure where we ever came up with what breakfast foods have to be, but sometimes pancakes for dinner, and I don't know, chicken or eggs or pizza for breakfast is not a horrible thing. But the biggest piece actually truly needs to be calm and supportive. Now, we can say this to you as adults about being in calm and calm. Telling your child to be calm is a whole nother story. They don't know honestly what that word means. So being able to try and be it yourself, at least from the beginning, so that then they can mirror you about what it needs to be done. Certainly, we've said it before. We're going to keep saying this: partner with your child's
But
teacher. Let
tell
your
tell them
teacher
what you're
know.
trying to do. Tell them that one of
Right,
the major goals you have is for your child to be calm, confident, and focused. And then talk to them about what you're doing and ask for their support and ideas that they'll have. Because some of these teachers are
right,
pretty good. Okay. Their parents, they
right.
might be low experienced teachers. They might have good ideas for you on what works for your child.
Well, and they may be doing certain things in their classroom as well. Like we know that there's certainly a number of classrooms that are using yoga and that are using various breathing techniques. We worked with a young lady last think that, yes, they've had it, but you didn't really even know why breathing. We're happy to answer that if you want to contact us, or can contact your kids and we'll tell them why that breathing piece really. By the way, breathing is a sort of an automatic kinds of things, except when you're stressed. And when you're stressed and you don't breathe in, then you stop breathing and your heart rate goes up. When your heart rate goes up, you constrict blood vessels to your brain, and then you can't think clearly, right?
And by the
So
way, we had a young lady whose heart rate literally went from 80 to 115 when she
just by
stopped breathing.
mentioning,
Just by
something,
mentioning the fact that some things got out of hand.
right?
So this is real. Breathing is
So,
real. What do we do, Mira, that helps
so
kids?
one of the tools, and we have it listed here, that we use is something called the Safe and Sound Protocol. It's the SSP for short. Dr. Stephen Porges has done research on this for over 20 years. It calms the vagus nerve, which is your brain to gut. I'm using this brain to gut connection that is really helps kids being able to regulate, integrate, and um, self-regulate their brain and body together to be able to have them come out of fight or flight to be able to be in a much more integrative process. So you yourself know, right, that you've had experiences whenever you come across something that you're not familiar with, or that you might be apprehensive about. Your breathing patterns actually really change, let alone your thought patterns change. Your self-talk changes about what you can't do versus what you can do. So we have found that it is a wonderful list music program that we encourage and coach parents and kids to be able to do together. And at the end of this, we're actually offering this as part of a back to school assessment special, because we feel so strongly about the fact that this is just a wonderful way to be able to try and get everybody off to the right start this school year. All right. Go ahead, Mark.
Okay, so one of the things we encourage you to do is observe with the goal of helping your child succeed. Now, there was a point in my life, I'll admit, that I used too many words. And I didn't create a clear picture. My classic example is my son asked me where to hit a golf ball once. And the tree was about 175 yards down the fairway. And I said 15 yards to the left of the tree. He hit the tree dead center. The ball comes bouncing back to us. And he says, "Dad, you teach this stuff. Why don't you use it?" I mean, you want to tell your kid what you want and why with as few words as is humanly possible. And one of the
Modeling is by far the best thing we can possibly do.
was that
Modeling is by far the best thing we can possibly do.
modeling works. And if you do like I did, which become a recovering extremeaholic, your kid will still tell you 20 years later, "But I knew you were mad at me, Dad." Okay. And there's some truth to that, okay? But we'll leave that for another time. The other thing is, when you pick a kid up at school or aftercare or something like that, probably the biggest eruptions happen right when somebody asks, "How was your day?" And it's like a volcano occurs. Have their most favorite music on when you pick them up. Or ask them at the beginning of the day, "What song would you like to hear when you get in the car?" It really triggers a whole different set of emotions. And then observe, and ask your teacher to observe what triggers your child. One of my kids was, if he was over hungry, it was bad. And if you're down here in Florida, when they're dehydrated, okay, it can really trigger them.
And if they're already thirsty, it's sort of too late. So you're always trying to be able to make sure you hydrate proactively.
And then try different approaches. And when you see things that don't work, jot them down. And when you see things that do work, jot them down, because they're gems that are worth keeping and amplifying what works and kind of chucking what doesn't.
All right, I'll move.
Okay. Now here's a big issue that we've already had 6 calls on this year, and we're still in August when we did this presentation. parents are trying to get an individualized education program for their child, and they want a special ed evaluation. And the teachers are saying, well, we don't do it that way. We first go through a process they're now calling MTSS, which is a multi-tiered system of support, which I've seen last a year and a half. Or they might call it response intervention, where they try different interventions, first in the classroom, then with a small group, and then maybe with a pullout. And at the end of that torturous process, if your child's not succeeding, they may choose to evaluate your child. Now, I had the pleasure of sitting in the Office of the Director of Special Education Programs in Washington, D.C. 10 years ago when I shared this problem that was occurring. And she said, well, Mark, did you get my letter? And her letter specifically says that RTI cannot be used to delay or deny an evaluation. She had her secretary bring up that letter right away. I've used it ever since. It's not a magic bullet, but it's the closest thing I've ever seen to one. What happens is, just almost miraculously, when you have a letter, and in Florida they have 60 days to do an evaluation, the MTSS process and the evaluation seem to come to a conclusion at roughly the same time, and schools can make a conscious decision with both the MTSS data and with the evaluation data. Okay, and it helps to be proactive. I say to a person, if I'm making a presentation at 9 o'clock, I said, it's okay if you give it to them tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, or it's okay if you give it to them next Tuesday, because Monday's Labor Day, at least when we're doing this presentation. But do it right away, because waiting almost never serves a benefit. But during this process, we entitle you to be both proactive and respectful, and work with your child's teacher, because at the end of the day, that's, again, the relationship that matters. Now, private schools,
they can see things as well. Right.
Private schools are a world by themselves, okay? They don't have to follow the Individual with Disabilities Education Act, the law that controls 504 or plans to give accommodations, don't exist for private schools. Everything you get is because you negotiate it. Okay. And so it's really important not to go in with it's your right, but to go in with the concept of saying, in order for my son or daughter to succeed, it would help if.
Right. And I think that this is a big flashing light, buyer beware. There are some wonderful private schools, but there are private schools that will say, well, we do have a special program, and they may charge more for it. You can remember that they may have the program, but if they don't do certain things that you thought that they were going to be able to do, there is not what we call or else, like the IEP safeguards are within public schools. So where they are offering specialized programs, and how often do we hear from parents that are saying, well, I sent my kid to this particular program and they thought it was going to be, they told us that they would follow the IEP that we had in school, and they aren't following it all, and I don't have any recourse. And
by the way, private schools are now in this incredibly good situation for them, where they have demand that exceeds their supply of seats. So some of them are saying, parents, if a parent complains, their child can be dismissed. So tread lightfully and respectfully. I just can't say it enough.
Because they certainly want to be able to have your business.
The other thing about private schools, which is important to understand, there probably are private schools that teach in a more kinesthetic way, that deal with executive function and deal with visual processing. We don't have to know any, okay? So private schools are not necessarily the answer for these kids, because they're being pulled, much like the dyslexia world, in a direction which says we're going to use programs that focus on phonics, phonemic awareness, vocabulary, and silent reading, and vocabulary, which are all good things, but they're not necessarily teaching the way a kinesthetic learner with executive function and visual processing issues learns.
Okay. So, how can parents and teachers ensure that the student gets now what we're calling an IEP? Again, we've been talking sort of all evening about the fact of cooperatively and proactively um, ask for the students. Now, they're going to be getting a lot of assessments over the next couple of weeks at the beginning of school as they are doing this continuous sort of progress monitoring. But what you really want to specifically ask for is their present level of their reading comprehension, not just their fluency. Because for these right brain visual kinesthetic learners, the comprehension is truly the key to how well they're reading.
And just so we understand, reading fluency is how well a child reads out loud, how efficiently, effectively. We've had cases where a fifth grader was reading in terms of fluency at the fifth grade level and comprehending at the first. And we had a ninth grader who was reading at the eighth grade level, so he's only a year behind, but comprehending 7 years below grade level. So, and there are some people who argue the two are correlate, but they don't correlate very closely for the kids we see. Okay. The next point is, if the child is in response intervention or multi-tiered system of support, you want to make sure the process is moving and you stay in regular contact. I was on a national committee with Don Deschler, who was actually the father of RTI, and my presentation was on parents need to be on the RTI bus. And before the presentation, he poked me in the chest and said, "You just better have the guts to say that." I'll say it again. Parents need to be on the bus. You're not necessarily invited to those meetings, but normally parents can be invited to the meetings where they review a child's progress. Okay. Again, make sure you get that evaluation in, follow up to make sure the timeline is met, and understand there are a lot of different ways to getting an individualized education program. One of them is other health impaired. And other health impaired in 1997, CHADD, which is a group that works for children and adults with ADD, got it such that if a child has ADHD and it significantly impacts their academic performance, they can get an IEP. I had a case once where a school said, "We choose not to do that." I used my own argument and got the kid the IEP that day. These are, and by the way, that's also true for convergence and sufficiency, which is the term used to describe many of the visual processing issues that we see. That can also be used if the child's convergence and sufficiency significantly impacts his academic performance and he benefit from special education services. That alone could qualify the student for that. And one of the things I'll say, parents work as a team. Okay, it's incredibly helpful. There are sometimes 6, 9, and we've seen as many 12 people on the other side of the table. Don't let one spouse, which is usually the mom, get forced to be in a meeting where they're 9 or 10 to 1. It's just not a fair game. And you also want to, sometimes it helps to play bad guy, good guy. I'm waiting to play the good guy one day. Okay, but hasn't happened
Well,
yet.
it's also vitally important to understand why this is such an important thing. We've had a number of parents over the summer that have said, "Oh, I don't want my child to be labeled." Understand that this is helping and safeguarding the child. That doesn't necessarily mean that everybody has all the answers of the exact things to do, but it truly safeguards one way or another. If your child is really frustrated and doesn't understand what's what we talked about at the beginning, right? They are looking at behaviors. Well, if I sat in a class that I didn't understand, or I understood sort of every third word, and or that I really kind of followed along and didn't really, wouldn't I at some point be really frustrated and act out? And this is really meant, I mean, in one way or another, kids are going to be labeled.
And
So
by the way,
really want to be able to empower yourself to be able to you be the ones that are in the driver's seat. So,
and
if you have any questions about it, please don't
yeah,
hesitate to
please
contact us.
call us because this
Yeah.
is an area that I feel passionate. We both feel passionate about. Both parents being involved. If your child really needs an IEP or a 504 plan, which gives accommodations, go for it and use an advocate. I mean, we've been advocates in meetings all over the country. Zoom has been a phenomenal thing to allow it. Okay. And then there is an article on our website on getting the right teacher. These kids benefit from a multi-sensory teacher who's empathetic, and it might be a little late this school year to do that, but you can write it into an IEP. You cannot write it into an IEP that says, I want Mrs. Jones. Okay, that's not acceptable. But if you describe the teacher and they wind up giving you the best, quote unquote, the best teacher in the school who happens to talk 152 miles an hour, and it's great for the kid who can understand things that going at that rate, that's a disaster for our kids. Okay, we had
Just because they had your older child doesn't necessarily mean that having for this particular child that has a different kind of learning profile that it's going to work. So have that open conversation, but truly be watchful and making sure that it's the right fit for your child and making sure that your child feels comfortable communicating directly with that teacher as well.
And don't be afraid to share a letter that describes your child. Okay, let me tell you something about Johnny. Here's what he's good at. Here's what he's bad at. You know, he did have a traumatic experience. Maybe he lost a grandmother last year, and it really affects him, you know, greatly. Maybe he lost a dog and it really affects him.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And just find ways to work with your child's teacher, because this is going to be a year where we think kids are going to either soar or really struggle. So we want you to make the difference there.
Let's start out right. Exactly.
Okay.
Go ahead.
And then
Well, if you follow some of our videos for the last couple of weeks, you've certainly talked a lot about assessing for success, and I think this sort of repeats a little bit about what we've talked tonight, but and what we've talked about for the last number of weeks. But it's important to be able to reaffirm about looking for what's right with your kids, assessing for that, having a team that all works together. Again, look for the present level of the reading comprehension, and then being able to come up with a plan and set goals. That's what we talked about last week.
And by the way, in our process, one of the things we've added is an assessment in the executive function area that also assesses a child's whether they should take the ACT or the SAT, what their projected score is, and what their projected score might be with help. Terrific tool for helping parents.
Yeah, that's
okay. And I think this slide actually should have made it in here. Okay, but we'll just go on. Okay, it's just in terms of we offer as part of what we do. Okay, an opportunity just to have a conversation. Okay, where we talk with you about what's happening. Okay, and offer you some advice. And then we can also discuss what, if you'd like some help, explore either an assessment or not. And for those people who invest in an assessment for their child between now and the 16th of September, we're going to be offering the Safe and Sound Protocol, which is a $300 value as part of that assessment. Okay. And
that's what we've talked about.
Right. And just
I think maybe it is.
Yeah, I don't know quite we did to me, but that's
I think it was right. It was right. Okay. I did too. Okay, we'll get it right.
Okay. And I join us. Go to our YouTube channel. We've posted the YouTube channel here on Facebook. We'll post it on YouTube as well as LinkedIn. Okay. There are other videos that you can watch. Okay. We'll be doing one next week on how to reduce homework time and stress. And most of all, if you one, we'd like to help you, but two, if you have ideas for subjects or people we could interview, we're looking to provide the most value to parents. So responding to your questions or interviewing somebody who you think is incredibly valuable, we're interested in engaging in those conversations. You can email us at info@3dlearner.com if you have, suggestions, or call us at 561-361-7495. And we wish you and your child a great school year. And if we can help in any way, you know how to find us.
Thanks for joining us. Have a really wonderful week. We'll talk to you soon.